Hello, everyone, and welcome to this special St. Patrick's Day celebration of contemporary Irish literature. My name is Sinéad Mac Aodha. I'm the Director of Literature Ireland, an organisation which promotes the literature of Ireland across the globe. It's my great pleasure to welcome two very special guests today, the writer Claire Keegan and her Argentinian translator, Jorge Fondebrider. Welcome to you both. By way of introduction, Jorge Fondebrider is an Argentinian poet, critic, and translator. He's an active promoter of Irish culture across Latin America and has translated all of Claire's work: Antarctica, Walk the Blue Fields, Foster, and most recently, Small Things Like These, Cosas Pequeñas como Esas, published by Eterna Cadencia in Buenos Aires. Claire Keegan has published two collections of short stories, Antarctica and Walk the Blue Fields. She published the long short story Foster in 2010, which was recently adapted for film and has been winning prizes across the film world, an Irish language film entitled Unculling Cune. Her latest book is Small Things Like These. She's won the William Trevor Prize, the Rooney Prize, and countless other prizes. You're both very welcome here today. So Claire, I was going to ask you about Small Things Like These. Can you tell me a bit about the book?
It's the story of a coal man and his family living in a small town, the small town of New Ross in 1985. And it's just a very cold winter, and he's kept terribly busy because he's going around with coal and timber and bottled gas and briquettes. And for those who can afford it, and not everybody can afford it. And it's set in the weeks leading up to Christmas, and there's a Magdalene Laundry in the town who also gives him business. And I suppose then it's the story of how he spends those weeks. I don't know how much you want me to say.
Did you have this coal man, William Furlong, in mind for a long time before you wrote him? I think he's both ordinary and exceptional.
I did. I think I thought about writing this story about 10 years ago. I started thinking about this story when the Ferns report was published. I remember being down at UCC. I was writer in residence there in Cork, and that's when I first thought about writing this. And I think the stories that are meant for you don't go away, although I don't like to test that. They might, if you don't listen with them, probably go off and find another author. But I do think that the things that keep nagging at you want you to take the time and imagine them. So that's what I wound up doing in this case.
In an interview in The New Yorker recently, you said that the writer is always looking for someone who's genuinely ailing or finding it difficult to cope, someone who is out in the deep water. Is your protagonist, William Furlong, a bit like this?
Well, I certainly believe he is. I think he's struggling with what he's had to carry for a long time and silently. And that these weeks leading up to Christmas just happens to be the time when that is punctured, and he can no longer just keep busy. I think he's somebody who keeps busy. You know, we all have different ways of dealing with pain and discomfort and how we struggle and cope. And I think his way of coping is by keeping ahead, trying to keep ahead of it and keeping busy and getting up in the morning and providing, and the wheel just keeps turning. And now at this point in his life, he's wondering what it's turning for, and will it ever stop, and can he stop it, and what would he do if it did stop, if he actually had time to think and time to wonder and leisure time, what would he do?
Yeah, no, may I ask something? Because you are telling in a very accurate way how he thinks and what kind of things he's dealing with. you had in mind all that before writing, or you discovered that while writing?
Oh, I just discovered it all while I'm writing, Jorge. I'd know almost nothing at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And do you normally work like this? I mean,
I'm not
excuse me.
interested in plotting anything.
Okay. And one thing which is linked to all that, how it starts story in your mind?
Well, I'm not sure how it starts in your mind, or in my case, it actually begins when you make an incision in time. As fiction is a temporal art. It's based on time that's irreversibly passing in one direction. And a day is the day. A day is a day. It's the same for everyone in every language, no matter where you are or what you're doing. And everybody knows what a day is. And I think maybe that's one of the reasons why translation is possible, because of that shared knowledge.
Normally you resolve our problem because we receive all the story already done. We had just to think in terms of one story that it's finished in one language, but you had to imagine everything.
Yes, of course. Of course, I think that's what you sign up for. I think it was Blake who said that he who cannot imagine thoroughly cannot imagine. And that always stayed with me. I thought it was like a slap, a reprimand. I thought if you're going to do it, well, then you better do it thoroughly, because you cannot half imagine something and convince yourself that you understand. So I read that when I was in my late 20s, I think, and it always stayed with me.
Furlong is a really likable character, isn't he? I mean, he's basically a good man. I love the way you showed him treating his daughters. I'm sure you did too, Jorge. You know, he's protective of them. He's got really good antennae. He's psychologically sensitive. He knows when his daughter is upset because the mother wants to take her to the dentist and she wants to go trying on jeans. And you've all these little signals. You know, the little girl is frightened by the big fat pretend Santa, and he's almost there immediately, putting his arm around her almost before she's ushered the fact that she's upset, and he's so gentle with her. But he's also internally, and I felt this is very typical of lots of parents, you know, that are thinking, oh my God, on the outside I'm taking care of this child, but internally I'm agonizing about the future. Will this child grow up and be able to stand on their own 2 feet? How do you choose the elements that you use to indicate that softness? What you put in and what you take out, if you like?
Well, I can't bore you by answering that question. It's just endless what you take out and endless what you put in, and then take all of that back out because you haven't found what it is yet. And it's like any other job. You just there's a whole lot of things nobody is in the least bit interested in. They just want to wind up with what is finished and see what the end product is. And I think writing is no different. But I mean, you have to work it within the limitations of plausibility, first of all. And it's one of the things I love about fiction, and one of the things I most dislike about people who don't understand what fiction is, because fiction really is about the truth. It can't abide. There is no room in fiction for what is implausible. The unlikely has to be cut away. So then you're going closer to what is even, rather than closer to what something that is far-fetched, which is what some people who I think know nothing about fiction believe fiction is. And fiction is about the truth about being human. And to make it work on the page, it must be even and plausible and likely. And so I think that's the parameter, first of all, the guide that you stay within. If it sounds unlikely, well, it is. And I think you begin to trust your ear after a while, or also you know that you're just not going to get away with that. It's tempting to leave something in, but it's more like a sticking plaster paragraph than, and it really is trying to get you out of work, and you just know that it's not doing the work it needs to do. My sister one time, she's a great knitter, and she came over from England, and I was crying because I had nothing to wear to a disco. And she said, you can knit this really quickly. And it was she had these huge needles and this wool, and it was the type of jumper or dress, or I don't know what she wanted me to make, which had a lot of gaps in it, if you like, and you could wear something under it, and then this would be trendy on top, according to her. And I started doing it in the morning, and about quarter of the way through, I just dropped a stitch and kept going. And when she came back in the afternoon and saw it, she said, you have to rip all of that back. I said, no, I don't. She said, yes, you do. You have to rip it all back, because you can't, it's not right. You have to rip it all back. And I often think that if you leave that sticking plaster in, sorry to be mixing my metaphors here, but you're going to have to go all the way back, and you'll never actually find out how well you could write. You'll never find out. So, and that would be a shame after spending so much time on it, to not spend a bit more time on it and find that out. Even though you'll also fail to find that out. Everybody fails in every book, I think, or at least we all believe we do or feel we do. And that's a natural part of the processes as well.
And I suppose in your case, taking your metaphor, if you drop the stitch in chapter 2, that has implications for chapter 7. So you have to keep that stitch in play, find that stitch and fix it so that chapter 7 works as well as chapter 2. That there are consequences.
Because we are talking a little bit about the craft, tell me, how do you know when you are writing a novel and when you are writing a short story? What make you think that will be a novel, that will be a short story?
I don't know until I'm finished. You don't know until you're finished. But to me, the material in this piece told me it was a novel. I know it's a really short novel, but it feels to me like a very economically told novel, because it has a whole town, the Catholic Church, a whole family with 5 named daughters. You get a feeling of the outskirts of the town, the past, his upbringing, and maybe even a hint of what the future holds. And those to me are characteristics of the novel. There is a social criticism in this. It is about a society, not just the individual. It is a criticism of the society. So to me that feels like a novel. It's not really the length of it. I suppose it could have been a long story and the same length in words, but the material isn't a short story.
I agree with you about it being a whole world. There's so much in those short few pages. The society is complex. I mean, some people say there's no such thing as class in Ireland. I think you very definitely show in this novel that there is. Is class difficult to depict in your writing? Do you set out to show what social class is like in Ireland?
No, I don't. I just get interested in someone and try to find the words to honor their life, that life, that day through that point of view. I don't have any agenda. I'm not interested in using anyone to make a point. There's a lovely essay by Eudora Welty, and in that essay, it's in a collection of her nonfiction called The Eye of the Story, the EYE of the story. And in it, she said that she wrote one essay on Chekhov, and in that essay, she said that Chekhov would never dream of making a point of anyone. And when I read that, I thought it was delightful, because I knew it was true, and I knew that it was articulating for me what I don't like about some fiction. That it is making a point of someone. Dostoevsky does this a lot, and I don't really enjoy his writing, because a person isn't a point. And I do feel that I'm more in the service of whoever I've chosen to write about, whoever I've found, whoever has found me, than I am using them to make some point that I want to make about living in Ireland in the 1980s, or whatever it is I'm writing about.
So for you, it's the character that matters, and being true to the character.
Yes, and listening. Most of it is listening.
How related are you in terms of your characters? I'm not talking about your life, but it seems that you put yourself in the life of each character when you write. Is that so?
I do. I really try to imagine what their lives are on a daily basis, and live with that quietly as part of my day, and try to articulate it then in paragraphs. Really, that's all you're doing, all from the time you begin until you send it away, and then it continues on even for a while after that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any facility, do you think, in imagining male characters over female characters, or does it matter?
Well, I was brought up in a misogynistic society, so I think I have a great advantage in imagining male needs. I was taught from the time I was very young, as most of the girls I knew were, to imagine what they wanted before they came in the door, and to meet them, and to kind of pacify the man as well, and not upset him. And so I watched men and boys. I had 3 brothers, and I watched them and saw what they needed, and what they looked for, and what they said and what they didn't say, and it really isn't much of a leap from doing that to writing from the point of view. But I mean, the leap is never really the leap is never really the gender leap. The leap is going into another life, somebody else's set of desires and set of difficulties, and set of the reality of that, and how their own character, their own personality copes or is unable to cope with that, how it has developed based on how it has developed. But yeah, I do think that, I mean, I've taught creative writing for 25 years now, and I really do think, from what I have seen, that women have less difficulty writing from the male point of view than a man does of the same age, from a woman's point of view. And I actually think that that's one of the benefits of misogyny, and I'm glad there is one.
At least there is one, yes. I was interested in what you were saying there about imagining the character, and how at the end of the day, it's not about the gender, it's about the person, and imagining what is true to that character and what's consistent. That's true for the reader as well, to a lesser extent, of course, because the creation is the first step, but then the reader has to make that leap too. How do you feel? What do you expect of your readers, if anything?
I don't know that I have an expectation of my reader. I think one very sound expectation to have of a reader is your knowledge that they can at any moment put the book down, and it takes less than a second to do so. So I suppose what you're using then to keep your reader with you is your own aesthetics as a reader. What pleases you? What makes you not put a book down? What is it that interests you and engages you and holds you there? And I suppose you are your own first reader, and really you're the last reader in the sense before it's published, because it's down to you. It's down to you to take your editor's advice or suggestions or not, and sometimes there is none. And it's that reader in you which is making those decisions moment by moment through the pages. It's the reader in you that's making the decisions. So I suppose I wouldn't have an expectation that my reader would have the same interest in those things that I do, but I do know that readers like pictures. And Flannery O'Connor talked about the art of writing fiction is the art of making pictures. And I feel that that's what I'm drawn to. I'm drawn to the image, and I think most readers are. The vast majority of people, when they are reading a story, want pictures and want the pictures to move. And that's got nothing to do with theme. It's got nothing to do with symbolism. It's got nothing to do with making a point of anyone. It might even have to do with being able to describe a man sitting at his own kitchen table after his wife has gone to bed and they've had an argument, and being able to describe just that section where he drinks a glass of water. And during the time it takes him to drink the glass of water, he decides that he doesn't want to be married anymore. He doesn't want to live like this. And that sounds like very little to describe, but it's actually the glass of water and the drinking of it that is more important than the decision. Because if you write it well, it will carry the suggestion of his decision, and you will already know by the time he leaves the glass down after taking the last sip.
I think you need a lot of craftsmanship in order to put everything we are talking about in that glass of water. I mean, yes, it's a very simple thing. It's a very simple life. You pay attention to that life, but you have to translate in a way all that into words, and words that can be as a kind of mediator between you and the reader. So you have to reveal the emotion. You are not talking about it. How do you learn to do that?
I really don't know how to do it, Jorge. I really don't know how to do it. I mean, all I do is just keep getting it wrong and trying to make it better, and not being, not finding what I need, but that's the work that you do, and you just do it until you feel it's the best you can do, and then you move on to another one, to another story. And I don't know that anybody knows how to do it. Maybe that's what keeps us writing. Maybe if it was something you could learn, it would lose its magic. And a lot of it isn't magical in any way. It may seem to have moments of magic aesthetically to some readers when it's published or when it's read, and some texts do, and some texts I think always will for me. And for most readers, we all have texts like that we go to. But I don't know, after reading the Paris Review interviews, all those Writers at Work series, I just don't know that anybody ever said they knew how to do it.
Anyway, you mentioned some writers during that conversation. You mentioned Chekhov, Uriah Wealthy, Flannery O'Connor. I mean, it seems that you had read all those writers, paying the attention. you need to build your own characters in a way. I mean, you are a good reader.
Yes, I'm just terribly slow reader, Jorge, just terribly slow. And I think getting slower, which is mildly terrifying sometimes, how long it takes me to read something. But I mean, that's just the way it is. I suppose I can't speed it up, because again, if I miss something, I feel that I may have missed something that I need for later on. And if I'm not concentrating properly, well, then I don't skip over or start with the opening sentence of the next paragraph. I have to go back and maybe even go back to the paragraph before the bit where I wasn't sure of it, if I had missed something there. So so it's ridiculous, really.
We're listening to you describe how you write, or how you read. Isn't that also how you write? That you take the most extraordinary care and go back and revise and revise. I mean, you're.
I do, but I mean, I don't see anything remarkable in that at all. I mean, if you want to find out what you can do, I don't think anybody. I mean, I think very few people write quickly and well. I don't know if anybody who writes quickly has found out what they're capable of. Maybe they have. I genuinely don't know. I'm not saying I'm suspicious of it. I'm saying I really don't know. I've never really admired people doing things very quickly, and although I've admired economy and efficiency, but those to me are different things. I'm never comfortable with anybody if they're in a hurry.
It almost sounds like a line to describe a character.
I think being in a hurry usually has to do with carelessness. I know horses know when you're in a hurry, and they always dislike you, because you can't, in their world, you can't be a leader and be in a hurry. You can be doing things quickly and effectively, but if you're in a hurry, you're actually not a good leader, and they won't follow you. They won't want to follow you, and I find that very interesting. And so I'm not interested in writing quickly and producing a book every year or even every 2 years. And I know I've spent most of my life teaching creative writing, and part of the reason perhaps why I didn't write more was because I spent so much time reading and writing comments on so many manuscripts. But I don't know if I would have learned the things I learned had I not done that. So
there is something that was very clear in the way in which I can remember receiving your manuscript. I received 3 different copies of your manuscript, and in each one there was additions, and but the final copy was the best, clearly the best, and that made me thought in something that I discovered, for instance, working on Flaubert 3 stories. To the 3 stories, there are in each story 8 manuscripts, different manuscripts, and what you read when you read the one that is published, there is a lot of things that lack, and that transform completely what is written. If you don't know Flaubert did so. In your case, it happens a little bit the same thing. Any new proof I received was different, but the difference was much more accurate. And there was things that you take out from the manuscript that make me think what I was translating once you made a change. So in the future, I suppose you are going to be studying.
I don't know, but I feel sorry for you having to go through 3 different versions of the same book in order to translate it. That must be an awful lot of extra work for you.
No, it was a pleasure. It was a pleasure. And also it was very interesting because, as I told you, I can see the way in which you were working to accurate more and more the manuscript. I wonder when you are ready to say, okay, it's finished, because I suppose that maybe once that is published, you're still thinking, oh, maybe I could do that, or in a new version. Or...
Oh, I don't know. At some point, I think you let it go. Sometimes you feel that the work is getting tired of you, which is a lovely feeling. Every now and then you feel like you're just meddling with it, and it's saying, leave me alone.
Yeah.
Would you please just leave me alone and go off and do something else now? I've had enough of you. And that's a lovely feeling, because then you're finished.
There is a proverb in Spanish that say, it's so good that it is better, it's worst.
Say that again. Say that again, Jorge.
It's so good that it is better. If it became better, it will be worst.
To improve it would make it worse. To improve it would make it worse. Okay.
Yeah, that's lovely, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's just lovely.
Say it in Spanish, Jorge. How do you say it?
Es tan bueno que si es mejor, es peor.
Okay. It is lovely.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, talking
Claire,
about
your relation is a very deep one. I mean, I've seen and spent time in your company with your French translator, your Chinese translator. What is your relationship with your translators? What do you think of them? We'll spare your blushes, Jorge. We talk generally as opposed to about you.
Well, of course, my Spanish translator is my favorite translator.
Oh, thank you very much.
And that it's a very special relationship.
Yeah.
But I don't know that you can compare, really. I don't know that you can make comparisons, and I don't speak the languages that my book is translated into. So I'm just pleased, really. For the most part, I'm just pleased to have my work translated. And then I'm really pleased if people are asking me questions and want clarification or me to explain something, because I do think it would be rather strange to translate a piece of fiction set in a country maybe you've never even visited or know nothing about, and not be asking anything about it would seem strange. So and sometimes it's wonderful because translators will find things that the editors won't or the proofreaders don't, and that's great. So it's at its very worst, I suppose, you may get some questions which make you think about proofreading the text again, and at its best, it probably finds so many new readers for you in another language, in another place, who want to imagine or want to connect with something that is not their own, as I do. I feel like that when I read the Russians, when I read Chekhov and Turgenev, and I really know that I'm not in Ireland, and yet it feels so Irish to me. Some of all of that parochialism and the greed over land and the families and the poverty and the fires and the lack of firewood and things like that, and yet I'm, as a reader myself, I am just so grateful for translations. I mean, my favorite writer probably is Chekhov. Those stories just mean an awful lot to me, and I wouldn't have them. I wouldn't know them if they had not been translated. So it's really, it is foremost a pleasure always to be translated.
Talking about translations, we were discussing some time ago with Sinéad about the problems your text has in terms of translation. And I said that the text don't bring any problem at all, doesn't bring any a problem at all, because if you follow you, it's okay. But the problem is that you are not translating just words, but also cultural facts. And that cultural facts are not the same all around the world. Just to give you a simple example, church doesn't have in Latin America as huge impact as, for instance, in Ireland. I'm talking about Catholic countries, but the power of the church was not as big in terms of a normal life. So this is something you have to imagine in a way. Just to give you another example, in the same way, most of the countries that education is not running by the church. So this is a rarity for us. You have to imagine how could it be in the case of that novel to live in a country in which your daughters cannot attend the school because it's a school running by nuns. So that, I suppose that must be the bigger problems for a translator, to try to imagine how to translate Ireland, and you are talking the whole time in terms of being an Irish writer, into another reality. And that could be very problematic. I remember another example, the name of Bill Furlong. He's called William, and that has a lot of importance in terms of being Protestant or Catholic. You explain that to your translators, me among them, and the thing is to try to figure out how to render that into another language is very problematic. That is a major problem in your text. I mean, you are guilty of being Irish.
Do you ever wish that there was, sorry, do you ever wish that, or do you often see in translations, in Spanish translations, notes to explain something like that, just very clearly and succinctly?
Well, yeah, of course. Well, this is, translation has trends. When I say that translation has trends, you don't translate now as 50 years ago or as 100 years ago. And also there are family of translators as well as there are families of writers. I think that sometimes you need a note not to impose on the text, but to make the text clear. And the farther you are in time and in space, the more notes you need. I don't know, just to give you an example, in Madame Bovary, there is a scene of a party in which the ladies put a glove on the glasses. That could be surrealistic if you don't imagine that at the time to do so was an indication to not be fulfill the glass again. So you have to explain that in a way. If not, there is completely out of the scheme of the novel. In your case, it's not as difficult now, but I suppose that in some years it will be more difficult because reality tend to change. Same thing, for instance, one thing that I noticed in the reception of your book, there were a lot of people not aware at all in Latin America about the existence of the Magdalene laundries, even if we had films about that. And people put attention on that Magdalene laundries in your text, which is not central, it's just a part of the plot of the story. But for many people that discovered that for the first time, it was something big, saying, oh, it's a novel about Magdalene laundries, you see. So in a way, as a translator, you need to guide a little bit, lead a little bit the reader to read what you want the reader to read, and not what the reader will achieve as an interpretation of himself. For that, a note could solve the problem sometimes.
I love notes on a text. I really do. Just as a reader, I do, and I often buy those Norton critical editions because they've all the annotations and all the notes on the bottom, and it's. I just love that, and also if you don't like them, you can just ignore them. So if you're the kind of reader who doesn't like them, you don't have to pay any attention.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Interesting, Claire, because in publishing now, right across the Western world, there is a bias against footnotes. It's seen as almost a weakness to include a footnote in a translation. And I'd be inclined to agree with you. You know, something that is very culturally specific needs the help of a note. You know, if you're baptizing the Christmas cake with a baby power, it's unreasonable to expect somebody in China or in Argentina to understand what that means. I understand as an Irish person of a certain generation, but I'm not sure that my son, who's, you know, 30 years younger than me, would. And that's just within the same culture. So if you go beyond and translate to far-flung cultures, you need those notes, absolutely.
Yes, I don't think the author should change them either.
Yeah, no.
I think if you really feel it's right, and to me that felt right, and I wanted the baby in it.
Of course,
I don't think that you should change that. I think you should have the note.
There is something in the perception. I try to imagine a book. I started that book with something in common among the whole humanity, and I thought, what is a thing we had all in common? And in a way, the first things I thought was the Beatles. So I asked people from all over the world 4 questions about the Beatles. And it was fantastic to know that, for instance, a guy in Mexico and a guy in Australia wanted to dance Hey Jude and then Don't Let Me Down because they can hug for 9 minutes their partner. But there is another thing linked to the notes. When I got the answer of the Chinese, for them, the Beatles were the same thing than Bruce Springsteen's ABBA or David Bowie, because they received everything without any chronological order. They received everything in the 80s. So for them, the Beatles are not special at all. I mean, they need that footnote in terms of understanding chronology. And I think in literature is almost the same thing.
Yes, I think it's bad manners not to provide it. I think it's just a courtesy.
Claire, I adore you.
You're still my favorite, Jorge. I'm going to get in awful trouble tonight.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I think on that note, maybe we should bring this fascinating conversation to conclusion. Thank you so much, Claire Keegan.
Thank you very much,
Jorge Fondebrider.
Pleasure.
We look forward to the next work, whatever it is, and to the next translations. Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And kisses.
Besos.
Besos. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.